Hello everyone and welcome to chapter 14. This is going to be a short video lecture just because I don't have class with you all today, but I did want to give you some information about the careers in physical education teaching. And one of the first things that's really important to understand about this particular field is that pedagogy is not coaching, it's not performance level, it's strictly based on making sure that the individuals are healthy. So think of a physical education teacher or a pedagogist as someone who's more aligned with the exercise psychologist point of view versus the sports psychologist point of view. So pedagogy or sport pedagogy, a physical activity, is basically studying how you are going to impart knowledge and teach it to other people. And this would mean that you need to be competent in a variety of different sports. It doesn't mean you have to be the best at anything, but you should be competent. And therefore, the people who kind of know what they're doing, they understand a variety of different subject matters. They've probably done a couple of sports. They've participated in a variety of different physical activities or recreational type of activities. And so therefore they're able to convey that information to students easier. They can teach it. They can break it down step by step. These are going to be your good instructors. Also, someone who has a background in pedagogy will be able to give a good answer to these types of questions. For example, the very first one, especially with little kids, is being able to keep their attention. If you cannot keep their attention, you may as well kiss that career as a physical education teacher goodbye. They're very, very active when they're young. They need structure. That's why I always start my classes with, warm up. And then I do the run, and then I do the skills. I do practice individually, do group practicing, and then I bring them together for things such as scrimmaging and games. I always do it like that because it's predictable. They know what's coming next, and it allows their attention to not go too far, so I don't have to keep bringing them back in. I still use those methods in my classes even right now, so they're extremely effective. How much time do I spend talking versus students practicing? You want to keep that to a minimal, a very small number of minutes, because you don't have a lot of time. Remember, it's about 55 minutes, and then 15 of those minutes are lost with the students dressing. Therefore, you got about 35, 40 minutes, and in between transition time, you're trying to explain stuff, I would top it out at a maximum of 10 minutes. For our activity classes, we have a 15-minute lecture period that we're supposed to give our students, and I don't use that lecture period time. I actually give them the information as they're doing the warm-up because I don't want to waste an entire 15 minutes. And our classes are an hour and 25 minutes long. I still want people to have that much more activity time. So I tend to give the instructions, because these are college students as well, I give the instructions during the warm-up. But I wouldn't take that much time. Look at your methods. Are they going to be effective? Do they work with your own children? Did they work with you when you were a child? These are just some of the questions you're going to ask, and you should be able to answer them well, especially when it comes to motivating, because sports, physical activity, and being fast or coordinated, these are not necessarily things that all students are good at. Even if they have straight A's, they may become discouraged. They may be overweight. They may not be fast. They may have some other medical issue that precludes them from really being at the top of their game. And therefore, how are you going to motivate these students who have grown up on electronics and don't even want to work out? That's going to be difficult when you're a PE teacher. Some of the careers that you can look forward to, for the most part, it's going to be a K through 12 setting. Later on in this chapter, it'll tell you that job prospects are high. That's a bold-faced Jussie Smollett lie. Job prospects are not high. Job prospects are about the same as they are for pretty much any teacher, but the turnover rate is high because of methodologies and because of behavior and motivation, things like that, but also because this is an elective field. And when they start cutting programs, then the elective fields are oftentimes the ones that they cut. So I wouldn't say the job prospects are low, but they're certainly not high. There's not a demand for physical education teachers across the nation. And so you'll be a teacher. You can also be a coach. That we're going to talk about that in a different chapter, because teaching and coaching are not the same. And when you start combining the two, you start having bigger problems, because students are not necessarily training to do a sport in PE. They're looking at lifelong health and physical wellness, versus when you coach, you are actually coaching for performance levels. When you blend those two together, it can cause frustration with students, frustration on the part of the instructor, and it can also discourage students who are not really athletic, but they still want to be healthy. And so that's something that we really need to look at a little bit deeper as we go into chapter 16. And many coaches will be PE teachers, and many PE teachers will also be coaches, but they're not the same thing. And a smart person, a smart teacher will know how to separate the two. I did not time my PE students' run like I timed the athletes who I was training track and field. It would just be totally unrealistic. Now, if I had a student who was in track and field and they were in PE, yes, I would try to push them a little bit more. But you don't hold the same standards to athletes as you do to individuals who are just taking PE for health-related purposes. Okay, so also you could qualify technically to work in like a YMCA, something of that nature, but it doesn't necessarily, even if you have a degree in health and physical education, it doesn't necessarily qualify you to be a personal trainer. You still have to have a separate certification there. And then, of course, if you go and get an advanced degree, master's or PhD, you can have a degree in pedagogy and then still teach at the collegiate level. My undergraduate degree is in health and physical education pedagogy. I also have an education degree, sports management degree. So it just depends on where you want to go in that spectrum of pedagogy, but there are several different options. Let me actually just give you a quick rundown of what types of these are the testings that are required for the certification, and not everybody accepts everybody else's certification. Alabama certification is different than California. They don't always have reciprocity with each other. I know for a fact that California doesn't accept anybody's certification except for their own. And in some cases, you have to take the praxis exam. It's kind of like the CBEST or the CSET test here in California. That's pretty common to take these exams. Some states don't require, they just require you to have the degree, and then they do a transcript evaluation. It just depends on the state. If you have a national teacher certification, then that certification is good in any of the 50 United States. But otherwise, each state has their own certification requirements, so that can kind of be a little muddled if you go to school out of state and then you want to get a certification in California. Then you would need to make sure that you abide by California's regulations. Otherwise, you would have to get recertified. Okay, and let's look down. I'm actually gonna skip through because that is a sidebar that you all guys need to read in your own books. Teaching expertise becomes very, very important when it comes to pedagogy because you have to know so many things. Generalists are wonderful PE teachers, and specialists can also be. It all depends on the setup of the school. When I was in high school, some of our PE teachers only taught volleyball, tennis, gymnastics. Some of them taught flag football. Some of them taught archery. I never saw the archery teacher or the dance teacher really teach anything else but those. But then you had the other ones who were kind of generalists. It just depends on the setup. A general rule of thumb that you should kind of hold to is remain competent in a variety of different areas. That's one of the things that helped me get the position here at Pierce, was because I was a multi-sport athlete and they needed someone to teach soccer and badminton and volleyball and weight training and body conditioning and boot camp, and I had already done all that. So that was a huge pull when I was coming into Pierce College because they actually needed somebody to do that. If you are a generalist, that would help you significantly in teaching skills to other people because you're not necessarily teaching them how to do it competitively, but it's for health purposes. So it will require professional development. Like anything else, you have to have professional development. And in addition to that, there are also some things that we need to know about doing a sport. So teaching experience or having an experience in a sport doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're going to know how to teach it. So if you did a sport, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can teach it, but it does help, okay? Also keep in mind, too, that when you teach an activity to a student, you also have to teach at an ability level. And this is why when we talk about the ABCs, cognition, behavior, and sports psychology, we give certain activities to certain age groups because they're mentally ready to have that. And that's going to be important from a teaching expertise point of view to understand from a mentality point of view what activities can be given at what age range. And so lastly, we look at to have a successful teaching experience, you really need to implement research. It can't be something that you just made up on the way over or something that you heard about. Does this work according to research? And the research doesn't necessarily have to be peer reviewed either. Has it worked in a smaller setting? Did you try it out with your own kids and they were receptive? Did you try it out with another class and maybe they were receptive about that? Did you try it out in your church setting that was receptive? Those also count as research-based initiatives and practices. You can validate your own experience and create your own tools to research something that was an individual thought or a creative thought of your own. These are our ABCs that we've already talked about, our affective, our behavioral, our psychomotor domains. When we look at cognition, skills, and attitude, that's going to be important for physical education teachers because they have to remember the rules. They have to remember strategies. They have to remember field placement. They have to remember the different locations that they're supposed to be on court and different movements, what rules are allowed, which ones are not, fouls. Can I hit the ball this way? How many strikes do I get? They have to remember all this for a lot of different sports. And so the cognition becomes important. And then also, even though it's a physical-based activity, you still have to grade them on some level of skill. I always made it a point to have my skills test not be more than about 10% of the grade because participation matters. And because this is not, you're not grading somebody on how good of an athlete they are. You're grading them on how much progress, not even progress actually, you're grading them on how they have completed a lab task. And that varies skill level wise, it varies. So it's participation. If you're doing what you're supposed to do, many times you will improve in skill just because you have been practicing the correct way. So remember, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. And as long as they're doing that correctly within the context of the lab, then that's where their academic performance and evaluations will come into play. So I graded people on their runs, on their push-ups, on their sit-ups. All of these things can be improved with practice in PE class. So just like math, if you aren't great at math, you have to practice more. Well, if you're not great in sit-ups or push-ups or the run, then you have to practice more than the average person would. And that's where some of our achievements and our grades and our assessments are going to come into play. I'm skipping over a little bit. So back to some of our successful aspects for teachers. Innovation is going to be important. Many of these sports they've already done. How can you put a fun twist on it? I once invented a game. It was a combination of basketball, hockey, and handball, played on a blacktop with mini soccer goals. And they could travel, they could run, they could do back laterals, forward laterals, anything. And they loved it because they weren't good enough to play basketball, some of them. They kept breaking all the rules for basketball. Handball was a bit much. And football, obviously, was not going to be allowed. And also, we couldn't get access to the field if it was wet or if somebody else had baseball. So this was a combination type of activity, and they loved it. You have to find unique ways to integrate PE with different subject matters, whether it's history, whether it's psychology, whether it is sociology. And we already had the sociology chapter, and you saw how important sociology was when it came to Americans and sports and sport consumption, how that impacted the trajectory of the United States. So these are ways that we can kind of put in politics and health aspects, movement, allied health, history, sociology. We can use all of that through these strategies because there's a lot of history that comes with minority and female participation in sports as it has kind of matriculated into the K through 12 pedagogy setting. So these are some other aspects that I wanted to let you guys know about. And then lastly, just a couple of trends. Like I said, this is a flat out lie. The prospects are not high. They were pretty moderate. More schools are adding PE to their curriculum. Yes, public schools, but private schools are not necessarily required to have that mandate. So like I said, it just kind of depends on where you're going. So in order to improve your employability, you want to have as many skills as possible. And that's why I always say that being a generalist is great. So think about a couple of these things. We'll finish up this chapter when I see y'all on Tuesday. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.